Behind a wrought iron gate in the heart of Worcestershire lies a home unlike any other, a grand English estate wrapped in serenity, secrets, and song. It's here that Robert Plant, the untamed voice of Led Zeppelin, chose to retreat from the roar of the crowd. But why did the Golden God trade roaring stadiums for countryside stillness? Today, we step inside his timeless home, his quiet fortune, and a life shaped by loss, love, and music that never fades. He was born not under stage lights, but beneath the soft industrial skies of West Bromwich, in England's Black Country. August 20th, 1948, Robert Anthony Plant entered the world as the son of a civil engineer father and a Romani mother, with stories in her blood. Even as a child in Halesone, Worcestershire, there was something unmistakably different about him. While most boys collected stamps or football stickers, Robert hid behind the living room curtains pretending to be Elvis. At 10 years old, already chasing echoes of something larger, something louder. There was a particular sound, he once said, between the French window and the curtain. It made me feel like I was somewhere else entirely. Where does the journey of a rock god begin? For Robert, it started with the blues. Obsessed with the haunting voices of Robert Johnson, Willie Dixon, Bukka White, and Sleepy John Estes, Plant devoured every note and lyric. At just 16, he left home to chase music. Not fame, not money, just sound. He tried accounting school. He lasted 2 weeks. He laid tarmac for Wimpy Construction and stacked shelves at Woolworths just to pay for amps, strings, and the occasional cheap gig. In the smoky pubs of Birmingham and Wolverhampton, he sang with bands that came and went: Crawling King Snakes, Hobstweedle, Band of Joy. It was in one of those bands he met a drummer named John Bonham. And that's when everything changed. 1968. Jimmy Page, already a respected guitarist with a vision for something seismic, was searching for a lead singer for his new band, the New Yardbirds. When he heard Plant belt out Somebody to Love, the deal was done on the spot. Plant didn't come alone. He brought Bonham with him. Together with bassist John Paul Jones, they would become a quartet unlike anything rock had ever seen. They needed a new name, one that hinted at power, gravity, danger. Led Zeppelin. And when their debut album dropped in 1969, it hit like thunder. Guitar riffs fused blues with Norse mythology. Plant's vocals soared like battle cries from another realm. Their rise was immediate, meteoric. Led Zeppelin 2, 3, 4, Houses of the Holy, physical graffiti, each one a new mythology carved in vinyl. And in the center of it all was Robert Plant, shirtless, golden-haired, a lion in tight jeans, with a voice that could summon storms. He wasn't just a singer. He was sex, swagger, mysticism, and menace, rolled into one. With Stairway to Heaven, he didn't just write a ballad. He wrote a hymn, a legend, a generational tattoo. Led Zeppelin didn't tour. They conquered. From Earl's Court to Madison Square Garden, the world became their stage, and the world paid handsomely. But even gods bleed. In 1977, while on tour in the U.S., tragedy struck. Plant's 5-year-old son, Karak, died suddenly from a stomach infection. The screams stopped. The lights dimmed. Devastated, Plant retreated from the spotlight. The next Zeppelin album, In Through the Outdoor, carried the weight of grief, and the heartbreak lingered. And then came the final blow. 1980. John Bonham was gone, choked on his own past. The band disbanded, and Robert Plant, arguably the voice of the greatest rock band in history, was left alone in the silence. But silence doesn't last forever. Plant re-emerged, first cautiously, then confidently, exploring new sonic worlds. He flirted with synth-pop, world music, North African rhythms, and American folk. Some fans didn't follow, but Plant didn't chase fans. He chased meaning. In the 90s, he reunited with Page for No Quarter and Walking into Clarksdale, reworking Zeppelin classics with Moroccan flavors and orchestral sweeps. Then came Alison Krauss. Raising Sand, 2007, shocked the world, haunting harmonies, old Americana, and a Grammy sweep. Plant, now older and wiser, had reshaped himself. Not just a frontman, a seeker, a craftsman, a storyteller. And somewhere along that journey, he bought himself a home. Not in the spotlight, but in the fields of Worcestershire. A place where the curtains don't hide a boy pretending to be Elvis, but a man, finally, being himself. So what does a golden god's sanctuary look like? Let's step beyond the gates and find out. Worcestershire home. Tucked away in the gentle hills of Worcestershire, behind hedges tall enough to keep secrets and gates old enough to whisper stories, stands a house that breathes. This isn't just where Robert Plant lives, it's where he listens, where he remembers, where he becomes small again. Just a boy, once more, behind the curtain. Welcome to Hurtwood Edge. Spread across nearly 18,800 square feet of classic English countryside, this estate is more than bricks and mortar. It's soul. And for Plant, it's sanctuary. So let's step in. The drive curves like a lazy melody past clipped lawns and old stone planters. Then, an entryway. Tall wooden doors, dark with age, framed by ivy that's been climbing since the Reagan years. The front hall opens wide as if taking a deep breath. Stone underfoot. The scent of aged wood and something faintly herbal. Rosemary, perhaps, from the garden just outside. To the left, a wood-paneled library, its shelves bowed under the weight of poetry, mythology, and leather-bound tour journals. This is where Plant disappears for hours, tracing words with fingertips as if they were melodies. To the right, an elegant dining room lit not by chandeliers but by soft sconces and the warm hush of conversation. Here, old friends gather. Sometimes musicians, sometimes just neighbors from the village, but always laughter. In the heart of the home lies the gourmet island kitchen, spacious, sun-drenched, and unmistakably lived in. Forget polished showrooms. This is a room where bread rises, where wine is poured mid-song, where Plant's grandkids might sneak cookies when no one's looking. From the kitchen, the house flows into a casual breakfast nook with French doors that open to the back garden, perfect for summer mornings and late-night tea. And then there's the study, more than just a workspace, a writing desk carved from reclaimed oak. Guitars leaned gently against the wall, not displayed but reachable. A stack of handwritten lyrics, some unfinished, some simply never meant for the world. Here, Robert Plant still listens for music. Down the hall, past twin staircases, we find the primary bedroom suite. On one side of the fireplace, a king-size bed dressed in soft, unassuming linens. On the other, a chair, worn from use, angled perfectly toward the fire. This is where he reflects, not on crowds or critics, but on family, on loss, on the passage of time. The bathroom is understated elegance, marble counters, brushed brass, and sunlight spilling through frosted glass. A private dressing room stands quietly nearby, filled not with flamboyant costumes, but scarves, boots, and lived-in denim. Plant never traded in velvet capes and excess. He traded up for comfort, depth, and quiet magic. Climb upstairs, and you'll find 4 guest bedrooms, each unique but united by a soft, rustic elegance. There's a game room, with vintage pinball machines and blues records stacked by the dozen. And just beyond that, yes, a screening room, though Robert calls it the listening lounge. Velvet chairs, dark walls, sound that wraps around you like a memory. And when it all feels too much, he takes the elevator. Yes, there's an elevator. Right down to the garden level, where the world opens up again. Step outside, and the estate breathes wider. A double-height loggia stretches out with towering ceilings and a stone fireplace, overlooking trimmed lawns that roll gently into the Worcestershire countryside. At dusk, this is where Plant often sits, fire crackling, glass of red in hand. Just him and the crickets. To one side, a pool and spa, modern in design but surrounded by ancient trees. To the other, a small vegetable patch, just enough to grow herbs, maybe a few tomatoes, because even rock legends like things fresh. And just beyond the hedges, a horse paddock, sometimes borrowed by neighbors, sometimes silent but always grounding. This isn't Malibu flash or Parisian glamour, it's English grace, a place where the man who once roared on stage can now whisper to the wind. Robert Plant doesn't just live here, he roots here. And like the ancient oak by the garden wall, he's not going anywhere soon. But as beautiful as this retreat is, it's not the only place he once called home. Because years ago, in the valleys of Wales, he built a different kind of life. So now, let's turn the page and revisit a mansion laced with ivy, legend, and the echoes of a different time. Mansion in Wales. Before there was Worcestershire calm, there was Welsh wilderness. After the storm that was Led Zeppelin and the personal heartbreak that followed, Robert Plant disappeared from the limelight. But he didn't vanish. He simply relocated to a place where clouds roll over emerald hills, where rivers hum ancient melodies, and where a Victorian mansion sat waiting, like a forgotten verse in one of his songs. Welcome to Penalt, a small village in southeast Wales. Remote, romantic, and for a time, Robert Plant's sanctuary. In the 1980s, just years after Led Zeppelin disbanded and the music world mourned the loss of John Bonham, Plant purchased a home here, a grand stone manor draped in ivy and heavy with history. It wasn't ostentatious, but it whispered stories. Built during the Victorian era, the three-story estate spanned over 9,300 square feet with 7 bedrooms, 6 reception rooms, and details that dated back generations. Let's step inside. The entry hall was quiet elegance, hardwood floors, high ceilings, and the creak of old stairs that had carried countless souls long before Plant arrived. To the right, a Jacobean-style drawing room lined with floor-to-ceiling oak paneling. It was a room for deep thoughts. Fireplace burning, record spinning, rain tapping the window panes. Plant often sat here, sometimes alone, sometimes with visiting musicians, letting the past settle into the walls like smoke. The kitchen? Rustic charm meets modern function. Wide, open, flooded with light. It opened into a breakfast room, where morning sunlight poured in like honey, catching in the steam from fresh tea. You can almost hear him humming, some forgotten blues line, as he buttered toast. But it was the primary suite that told the truest story. Sprawling across the southeastern wing of the house, this private retreat looked out over the lush Welsh countryside. Rolling hills, stone fences, sheep in the distance, an ever-changing painting framed by mullioned windows. The ensuite bathroom was simple but serene. Tiled floors, clawfoot tub, antique brass fixtures. Every element seemed chosen not for show, but for stillness. A place to feel. Outside, the house wore its ivy like a green veil. The gardens were not overly manicured, they breathed wild. Winding paths, old stone benches, patches of herbs and native blooms that felt spontaneous, like melodies unscripted. At night, mist would roll in across the lawn, swallowing the view in silver silence. It was the kind of place where a man could mourn, heal, and eventually begin again. Robert Plant lived in this house for about 5 years, a crucial in-between time in his life. He was no longer the frontman of the world's biggest band. He was a father grieving his son, an artist redefining his sound. a man rediscovering himself. This house saw him through it all. And though he eventually sold the property, it remains one of the most quietly iconic residences in rock history. As of 2025, it was listed for sale at $3.4 million. But what price can you place on history? On healing? Today, Penalt continues to echo with birdsong and breezes. But for a few years, it also carried something rarer. The voice of Robert Plant, whispering from windowsills and woodland trails. Now, as we close the doors on this chapter, a question lingers. Where did all of this music, this pain, this wandering lead financially? What is the quiet fortune of the man behind the Golden God myth? How much is a scream worth? A scream that shook stadiums, that opened whole lotta love, that echoed through generations. For Robert Plant, that voice, wild, soaring, unmistakable, has translated into something surprisingly understated: a quiet fortune. As of 2025, Robert Plant's estimated net worth stands at $200 million. But this isn't the kind of wealth paraded through tabloids or flashed on red carpets. It's earned slowly, through vinyl grooves, touring stages, and the persistent hum of royalties flowing like background music through the decades. So what does $200 million buy a man like Robert Plant? Not jets, not yachts, but time, peace, and choice. The choice to live among fields, not followers. To walk the woods in Worcestershire, not the red carpet in Cannes. But while his fortune may be quiet, his heart, it speaks volumes, especially when it comes to giving back. Philanthropy. Robert Plant doesn't shout about his giving. He never needed to. Because true generosity, like true music, doesn't require amplification. It resonates. And Plant's philanthropy, much like his voice, carries soul. It began, quietly, in the wake of unspeakable loss. In 1977, during a U.S. tour with Led Zeppelin, Plant's 5-year-old son, Carrick, passed away suddenly due to a stomach virus. The tragedy silenced more than music. It tore a hole into the heart of a father. And from that hole, compassion grew. Years later, when asked about his charity work, Plant never tied it to fame or obligation. He spoke of healing, of channeling grief into purpose, of wanting to make some kind of noise that actually matters. In the decades that followed, Plant quietly became a pillar of support for causes that touched his heart. He donated to pediatric hospitals and child welfare charities, often anonymously, often in memory of Carrick. He became a longtime supporter of Cancer Research UK, contributing not only funds, but also performances at benefit concerts where every lyric carried extra weight. He also stood behind Noordoff Robbins, a music therapy organization that uses the healing power of sound to reach those suffering from trauma, disability, or isolation. For a man who has always believed in music as medicine, this was a cause that echoed his core. But his giving wasn't just across oceans or in distant institutions. Plant turned his focus close to home, Worcestershire. He supported local youth music programs, donated to community arts centers, and even helped fund instrument libraries for schools in rural England. He believed every child deserved a chance to play, to find their voice, just as he had behind the curtain at age 10. And when floods ravaged parts of the Midlands, Plant joined regional relief efforts, using both his name and his checkbook to rebuild. No press releases, just action. In 2010, Plant was appointed a Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE, for his services to music. But many in his hometown believe that recognition should have also read, "and for his quiet service to people." Even in 2023, when the world returned to large-scale festivals, Plant insisted on including local charities in profit-sharing arrangements for shows. Music to him wasn't just performance, it was reciprocity. Perhaps the most telling story? After a successful tour with Alison Krauss, Plant declined a 7-figure solo contract. Instead, he chose to spend time supporting environmental restoration projects in the Welsh borders and wildlife charities protecting native British species. Why? Because in his own words, money is only useful if it lets you give something back and feel free while you're doing it. So when we think of rock stars and charity, we often imagine flashy galas or photo ops with giant checks. But Robert Plant? He rewrote that script. His philanthropy is personal, grounded, and deeply connected to place and memory. Like a song played in a quiet room. It's not meant to impress. It's meant to move. But beyond the causes and the checks, who is Robert Plant when no one's watching? How does he live, laugh, and love away from the headlines? Personal life. Welcome to Robert Plant, the man, not the myth. At his estate in Worcestershire, mornings start quietly. He's known to rise early, not to chase headlines, but to walk barefoot through the garden, cup of tea in hand. Sometimes he hums. Sometimes he's silent. Always, he listens. Family remains the heart of his private life. Though his marriage to Maureen Wilson ended in the 1980s, their bond remains deeply respectful. Their daughter, Carmen, now an artist in her own right, often visits with her children. Plant is said to be a devoted grandfather, with a soft spot for storytelling, passing on myths, poems, and bits of blues history as bedtime tales. His sons, Logan Romero and Jesse Lee, have carved their own paths, but remain close. There are no extravagant red carpet family photos, no headlines chasing their names, just shared dinners, guitar sessions, and the occasional walk through the fields. And then, there are the horses. Yes, Robert Plant keeps horses on his land, not for sport, not for show, but for their quiet companionship. He's been seen brushing them down himself, speaking to them softly as if they're old friends, which in many ways they are. Horses don't care about platinum records. They respond to tone, patience, rhythm. And isn't that what Robert has always been a master of? His daily life is a blend of ritual and randomness. He's often spotted in local pubs, pint in hand, chatting with farmers, poets, and musicians like they're old mates, because they are. He'll drop into bookshops, thumbing through history texts and obscure folk anthologies. Sometimes he takes long drives through the countryside, no destination in mind, only old blues tracks playing from the stereo. He says these journeys remind him of who he was and who he still might become. Travel remains in his blood. Not stadium tours anymore, but curated adventures, trips to Morocco, Nashville, small villages in Eastern Europe where old songs still live in the air. And wherever he goes, Plant doesn't just visit, he absorbs. Local instruments, forgotten stories, new flavors, they all end up in his notebooks, in lyrics not yet released, in memories that season the man. Spiritually, Robert Plant is a blend of pagan roots, mystical fascination, and human empathy. He speaks often of energy, of the rhythms of the earth, and the pull of the moon. Not in a performative way, but like someone who has stood still long enough to notice. Music is still his church. But now, the pews are oak trees, and the choir is birdsong. So no, he doesn't live like a legend. He lives like a man who's earned peace, without abandoning the wildness that made him. At 77, Robert Plant is still in motion. Not running, not chasing, just walking, gracefully, through the second half of his life. And in a world that moves too fast, perhaps that's the most radical thing a rock god can do. Because if Led Zeppelin was thunder, Robert Plant today is the stillness that follows. Now, if you've followed us this far into the heart of a man and his music, don't stop here. From screaming arenas to silent gardens, Robert Plant's life is a song that never stopped evolving. If his Worcestershire retreat, his quiet generosity, and his timeless voice moved you, imagine what other stories await. Subscribe, like, and join us again as we step into the hidden lives behind the legends.